Hello, everyone. Tried something new today. Hopefully you were able to see the first slide of the presentation. I will continue to let people in as they join. We have a couple of guests that are joining us today, but I want to thank you for your patience as we begin to start. I'm Pete Kurty, principal of Glacier Ridge. This is the full return family presentation and Q&A as we prepare for full return beginning March 15th. So a couple of things. First of all, welcome and thank you, as I have begun many of our presentations at the beginning or throughout this year. Thank you for what you have done to support the school and your children, and all you have done as a collaborative effort throughout this year. It hasn't been easy on schools, and it certainly, as a dad and family person myself, hasn't been easy on family. So thank you very much for that. I will let you know, I'll introduce the guests in a moment, but I also want to let you know a little bit of logistics as we begin. If you have questions, we do have a decent amount on the call. So just logistically, if you have questions, feel free to type them into the chat. If you need to, you're welcome to unmute yourself and chat, but if you would type your question into the chat, that would be helpful. We do have somebody here monitoring the questions, and I'll monitor the questions as well. The slideshow will be available afterwards. We'll email it out in our newsletter via email, and it will also, this presentation, the recording of this video will also be available for families as well. So thank you very much for attending. We appreciate your time. I'd also like to introduce Kellie Axelband, who is here. She is our admin intern. She will be co-presenting with me on a few slides. She'll also be monitoring the questions. And then we also have Kim Atherton, who is our school nurse. And she's also the lead nurse for the district. So she'll be here to answer a lot of the health questions. So we'll kind of begin with a little bit of her information in a moment. And Kim, just feel free to let me know if you need me to stop, but I will just introduce, go through a few slides, and then I will turn it over to you. Kellie, I can see you on my screen. Can you hear me and everything good? Can you see our screen? Okay.
Yeah.
So as people join on, thank you very much. We appreciate, again, your time. We will go through as the slides go through. You can see our table of contents. We're going to start with general health information, and that will be provided by Kim Atherton. And she will talk about some quarantine procedures, updated information about health and safety, and then symptoms and procedures for that. Then we'll get into classroom procedures and health and safety procedures regarding classroom. Then we'll talk about arrival and dismissal procedures, lunch and breakfast procedures, and then of course, a fan favorite of all the students, the recess procedures. I want to begin, these were 4 things that we really talked a lot about as a district, and particularly a school. We're navigating a pandemic for the first time in at least my lifetime. And there's a lot of unknowns, and you would think that a year into this, we would know exactly what to do and when to do it. But as we're navigating full return in a pandemic, this is still new territory, and that's kind of been par for the course the entire year. So we are constantly looking for specific guidance, specific criteria, and specific things regarding health and procedures. And sometimes those things are there and sometimes they are not. So these are the 4 recommendations that we really came up with as a district to really guide us through our thinking. And if we follow these things, sometimes the line may change and sometimes the procedures may change, but really these are the mitigation strategies that we'll have in place. And you'll notice there is a little bit of ambiguity, but essentially with these mitigations, we will continue to make sure that we provide that health and safety. So the first is really physical distancing, and that has always been the case. And you'll hear that it's changing a little bit in terms of what schooling will look like and the distance will look like. But physical distancing, if we can separate kids as much as we can, we will. Frequent sanitizing. Sometimes it is more frequent, sometimes it is less frequent, depending on the activity, but continuing to sanitize and hand wash and clean items. Number 3, wearing masks as much as possible. Obviously, kids need some mask breaks, and there are some opportunities where they need to take them off in terms of lunch, but wearing masks is definitely a mitigation strategy that has research has proven to be effective. And then minimizing touch points and congregating. So obviously students will be in similar locations and sometimes sharing activities or materials, but minimizing that as much as possible. So those are the 4 main things that have guided us in our procedure development as a district and as a school. I would like to turn it over to Kim Atherton. She has really worked closely with many of the mitigating committees at the district level, and worked closely with our student services coordinator with the health and guidance. So I'm going to turn it over to her, and she's going to talk a little bit about health and safety in general, really touching on the symptom protocols and what that looks like if your child has a symptom at school or at home. She's going to talk a little about general health information and procedures, as well as general Q&A. And then she's going to get into the updated and modified quarantine and how that looks at Glacier Ridge. So Kim, I'm going to mute myself, and if you want to unmute, you can do that.
All right, thanks, Dr. Kurty. You can hear me okay? Okay, so basically just a couple of things I wanted to touch base with you guys on is just to talk about the protocols that we have been practicing throughout the year. We have had the algorithm that has handed down from the Franklin County Public Health.
Kim, can you hear us? We can't hear you.
Let me try something else.
I could hear her.
Let's do this, Kim. If you can, it might be you need to give access to your microphone. And as you continue to work on that, we'll continue with our presentation. And then once you're able to, oh, it says you can hear. Can you hear Kim?
I can hear Kim. I'm not sure if everyone. Yep, they said they can.
Oh,
okay. Sorry about that. My headset was not working, so I apologize. But basically, I just wanted to take a minute to go over things that have changed and then things that remain the same for us from the beginning of the year. And one of the things that has not changed is the symptoms algorithm that we started with in the fall from Franklin County Public Health, and they worked in conjunction with Nationwide Children's Hospital as well as Columbus City Public Health Department, just to kind of establish some guidelines for us to follow in the schools in regards to symptoms, and that has not changed. So we will still be required, if a student is ill with symptoms such as a runny nose, congestion, a sore throat, cough, any kind of respiratory shortness of breath, fever, any of those things will require a negative COVID test or an alternative diagnosis from a physician to be eligible to return back to school. So that piece of it hasn't changed. So we really are encouraging, we want to obviously keep kids in school as much as we possibly can. So we're really encouraging everyone to continue to stay on top of those symptom monitoring. And if there's doubt, we would prefer the students to stay home from school just to prevent any major outbreaks or large quarantines that we would have to do within the classroom. So those symptoms, again, I think there's been conversation that maybe since we were going all in that was changing, but that is not the case. So we will continue to practice that protocol throughout the district. And then the second thing I wanted to talk about is we've had the standard quarantine, and people are put into quarantine when they've been identified as having a close contact exposure. And you guys have heard us talk about this throughout the district, I'm sure multiple times, about within 6 feet proximity for 15 minutes. So if someone is positive and would happen to come to school, they didn't have symptoms developing yet, but we would have to contact trace that individual. If they tested positive, we would contact trace them and find out if there was anybody that was within 6 feet for 15 minutes. That would be our typical quarantine. All those people that were identified would then be put in a 10-day quarantine where they would have to stay home from school. They would not be permitted to go, outside of their home pretty much, unless it was just like in their own yard, but, no other contact out of sight of people that they live with. Since then, Franklin County Public Health and Ohio Department of Health have implemented and the district has adopted what we are calling as a modified quarantine. And basically what that says is that if you are identified as an exposure, so within 6 feet for that 15-minute window, but both the positive person as well as the person that was exposed, if they were both wearing their masks appropriately or their facial coverings appropriately for that time span, then they could be put into what we call a modified quarantine. So modified quarantine then means that the student is still allowed to come to school, but after they are done with their school day, the expectation is then that they go back home and they don't participate in daycare, they don't participate in extracurricular activities, they don't go shopping, all of those things. So basically, it kind of reminds me of when a kid loses their license for speeding and they get driving privileges so they can drive to school and drive back and forth to school only. It's kind of the same thing. So as long as the appropriate mitigation strategies that Dr. Kurty has just talked about, as long as those are in practice within that school building and in that classroom, then they're allowed to be in what we call that modified quarantine. So for us, what that means is that we will look at every scenario just like we are right now. We'll continue with the contact tracing, and then we will specifically look at whether they had a mask on for that amount of time, both parties, or if they didn't. And, before we would always say it didn't matter if they have a mask, because everybody would say, oh, but yeah, but they were wearing a mask. And that's great. We're glad that we're doing that. But at this point now, it does matter. So, keeping those masks on is awesome. And we're really going to continue to, try to make sure that in the classroom, we are practicing all the appropriate social distancing. We're making sure we're sanitizing our hands. We're making sure that our kids are wearing their masks and they're pulled up over their nose. And, we're just keeping all those practices in place. Now, there are going to be situations such as the bus where we're not able to maintain that standard that the district has established. So if someone is exposed on the bus, they very well could get a straight, regular, old-fashioned quarantine, meaning that they would have to stay home and not come to school for those 10 days. So we have to look at two different things when we're considering it. And the first thing is, what is the likelihood that they have actually contracted the illness from the positive person? So were they social distancing? Were they wearing their masks? And then the second thing that we have to look at is, what's the likelihood that they will transmit it to other kids in the school? Again, are they staying in an environment that's got social distancing and mask wearing, hand washing, all of those good things? So, we're looking forward to moving forward with this. We want to keep the kids in school. We're hoping that, this allows us to do that. But we do know we will have modified quarantines, because with the space that we're allotted, the definition has not changed for a exposure. Exposure is still 6 feet. With us moving to 3 feet in the classroom, if someone is positive, there's going to be some other students that have been identified as contacts that have been exposed. So they will be then put into that modified quarantine as long as they were both wearing masks. Any questions at this point?
Yeah, why don't we open it up for general Q&A regarding health and safety. Keep in mind, we are going to go over the classroom procedures, health and safety, as well as recess and lunch procedures. So if you have anything regarding the modified quarantine, feel free to put them in the chat. Kim, can you talk a little bit about why the bus might be a different situation than maybe a classroom?
Sure, absolutely. So the health department allows us to utilize this modified quarantine protocol because we have certain standards in place. We have a policy to protect the student's safety for, COVID in general. We have a standard minimum practice throughout the district of 3 feet, which is the new direction that was handed down by the health department. So as long as we're doing, we're wearing masks, and we have practices in place of contact tracing. So as long as those 4 items are met with a minimum distance being 3 feet, then we can utilize the modified quarantine. However, on the bus, we could have 3 kids to 1 seat. So on the bus, in regards to those 4 guidelines, we will not be able to meet the minimum standard of 3 feet social distancing. Therefore, that takes modified quarantine off the table for us. So it would have to be a straight regular quarantine.
Yeah, thank you. We have a question. Are those notified that there is a modified quarantine in the classroom? So if they, I assume if there is a positive, are people notified if there happens to be a close contact? And are those kids in the modified quarantine back to 6 feet?
So yes, we notify, if there's a positive case in the classroom, we notify the entire classroom that there has been a positive case. If someone is identified as a close contact exposure that would be required to quarantine, either a modified quarantine or a regular quarantine, we reach out to them individually and we have that communication with them. We send an email out or a phone call, and a lot of it depends on the time of the day, how many kids we need to, or families we need to notify, and just a timeline so that we make sure we get that communication out in a timely manner. So yes, everybody who would be identified as a contact exposure or someone that is required to quarantine would be notified directly. And then, of course, we do send out the building letter that just so everybody in the building is aware, parents are aware that we did have a positive case in our building as well. And those are all directed by the health department. And I think there was a last part.
The second part of that question was if they are now a close contact because they were within 3 feet, so they've been identified, they're not the positive student that tested positive, but they're a close contact with one. The question is, are they required to go back to 6 feet then?
They are not. Franklin County Public Health has established, as well as ODH and I believe the CDC have all established that 3 feet is an acceptable distance in the school as long as masks are appropriately worn. We will evaluate each situation independently. If there is someone who is not a good mask wearer, we'll talk to the health department and review the scenario with them, because they're the ones who ultimately are putting everyone in quarantine. It's not us. We're just the messengers. So we will have conversations with them, tell them this information, will give us guidance and direction as to whether it should be a modified quarantine or a straight quarantine. But as far as if they're in a modified quarantine, they will continue at the same social distance of the 3 feet.
Yep. So one of the most frequent questions that came up, and I can help with this one, Kim, and feel free to correct me. Our procedures, whether it was 6 feet or 3 feet, has been so that way an entire class does not need to quarantine. And we've been fortunate that we have not had to do that. So the question is, do we expect an entire class to be exposed and quarantined? And if that happens, will it be virtual for 2 weeks? So the way the modified quarantine works is, now we're in close contact, but the Franklin County Department of Health says that they don't have to quarantine from school. And the reason is because research has shown that it is not spreading necessarily at school. Does it happen? Possibly. But kids that are exposed as a close contact do not need to quarantine if they're not the ones that test positive. So even in this environment, we don't anticipate that a full class needs to be quarantined unless it does to be a super spreader event and kids begin to test positive. That might be the case. So for example, Johnny, Melissa, and Sarah all sit at a table close to each other, but 3 feet apart. Johnny tests positive, and Sarah and Melissa are close contacts within 3 feet. Johnny has to remain home because he is quarantined because he tested positive. Sarah and Melissa can come to school because even though they were close contact. However, they must be quarantined at home for outside of school activities. Did I say that correctly, Kim?
Yes, that was absolutely perfect. And the only thing that I might add is, as long as they were appropriately wearing their facial coverings during those times. Yep.
Correct. Yep. And I'll be honest with you. Many of you have maybe not have seen inside the classroom, obviously, but kids have been doing a great job wearing masks. They're well versed in it, even kindergartners at this point. So we're really talking about the special needs or extreme populations that may have cognitive or physical difficulties wearing masks, but essentially a large majority, if not all students, can properly wear masks regardless of the age group. The other question is, how long is the quarantine period for those that are considered close contact? So even with the modified quarantine, how long is that quarantine length, which I know has changed a bit as well?
Yeah, so what we have to look at is when the last date of exposure occurred. So if it's in a classroom, let's say Susie is positive and Billy is a close contact. Susie was at school on the 10th and is no longer at school. We would use the 10th as our first official day. And you count, so that would actually be day 0. So they would be in quarantine for 10 days, the modified quarantine for 10 days. They would still be coming to school, but no outside activity after that. And then on day 11, which would be, I believe, the 21st, then they would actually be out of that modified quarantine and back to normal activity after school hours. So it's a 10-day quarantine from the last date of exposure.
Okay. The next question, which is a pretty popular one or frequent one as well. Where did Franklin County say it was spreading from if it's not spreading at school?
Well, that's a tough one. We have been tracking throughout the district pretty detailed information on our cases. So for example, if we have somebody who is positive, everybody that's a close contact, we keep track of them. Anybody that would flip to a positive, then we know happens in school. My experience and what I am seeing through all of my buildings and with working with a data committee, as well as working with the other nurses in the district, reviewing our log, what we're seeing is most of the exposures are occurring from outside sources. Parents are getting it at work, they're positive, and then maybe the student will have to quarantine because mom or dad are positive, or maybe there's been a birthday party that everybody, a group of 30 or 40 people have went to, or they had like a little dance in the fall to like mimic a homecoming dance. So I think we're seeing exposure they were contracting COVID out in the community a little bit more than what we're actually tracking here in the school. So we are tracking, just so you know, if there's an exposure that occurs from 0 to 3 feet, if it's from 4 to 6 feet, and then if it's inside school or outside school. So this is data that we collect on every single case that we have and every single quarantine that we have, so that we can look at data and information and make sure that we're making the best decisions. And so we have not seen a large amount of illness of COVID that's being spread within the school, but other outside events we sure have.
And that's consistent at Glacier Ridge. We've had very, very few, if any, off the top of my head, that have actually spread it at school. And you wouldn't know that necessarily, but you've noticed that there have not been any COVID information letters that have gone out in a significant amount of time. So that's another indicator. The next question I think I can answer, Kim. Do you know if the bus will have assigned seats with their siblings, or what will this look like? Yep, we will have assigned seats. In fact, we'll have assigned seats everywhere, and we'll get to that in a little bit, and we'll talk about why there are assigned seats and how the assigned seats were designated. But yes, they'll sit with siblings, and as Kim mentioned, we will try to have them with siblings, but not everybody has a sibling. And the transportation department really is trying to spread out and reduce the route size or the bus size of population as much as possible, so that way they can be spread out on the bus. But of course, we're limited with the number of buses that we have. So they are working on that as we speak, which is why there will be updated route times and stops. So, but yes, there will be assigned seats on the bus as we have already. There will just be more kids on it. Any other final questions for Kim regarding health or quarantine, or any information regarding Franklin County Department of Health or procedures before we get to classroom, lunch, recess, and related arts? If you do, feel free to email me. I will put my email in the comments, so you can email me and I will email that to Kim Atherton, and we'll get you the answer, or you're welcome to call the office as well. One last question, Kim, you may or may not know this. What long-term studies have been done on long-term hand sanitizer use? I've wondered that myself, and I'm not aware of that. Do you know any long-term impacts of frequent hand sanitizer use?
Well, I think there's a lot of theories. I don't know of any right off the top of my hand in regards to studies, but I could certainly do some homework. And if you would like or reply to that, I can see if I can find some information for you. It is definitely something that we have been talking about for sure, because that is, something that, as Dr. Kurty has just said, it's been on our mind as well. What kind of an impact that could potentially have, long-term. So, but I do not have any of that data or that information right in front of me at this point.
One thing I'll tell families is that we do have abundant hand sanitizer. But we also have access to the sinks in the classroom with traditional soap, and students can have traditional soap and hand washing in the bathrooms. So sinks are all still available in the cafeteria. So all the sinks and soaps are available. So if you prefer that your child use soap and water traditionally, which is probably more effective, or just as effective, then you're welcome to do that and have that conversation with your child, and then also email or let your teacher know as well, so that way they can make sure that those procedures are available. But I totally understand. Okay, Kim, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Again, if you have any other questions, feel free to email us. But thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. We will continue with our procedures. I'm actually going to turn it over to Kellie Axelband, our admin intern. She's going to go through a few of the procedures and what it looks like in the classroom as we have been transitioning. We've been doing a lot of work with our students. A lot of staff have been planning these past couple of weeks. So Kellie?
Hi, everyone. As you can see from that picture, our teachers have been working hard to, alongside our custodian, to really rearrange their rooms and get ready for full in with our 3 feet social distancing. So every classroom looks a little bit different, and the teachers were given the opportunity to, set up their classroom in the way that would work best for them and their students alongside our custodian. So we're excited, and all of our teachers can't wait to get all of the kids in at the same time. And all of the classrooms look great, and they're all ready to go. Some of our main classroom protocols that we wanted to point out was that, students will be at least 3 feet apart. They will have assigned seats, and the teacher will have a seating chart. If they can do 6 feet, we're going to encourage, that, but the minimum will be 3 feet. Students will wear masks at all times, except for during mask breaks and eating in the cafeteria. And at those times, they will be 6 feet apart. They will sanitize and wash their hands upon entry and exit and every hour. Again, if you prefer traditional soap and water, just let the teacher know. We are happy to accommodate that. And I'm sure students will be doing a mix of those. It's not just strictly sanitizer or strictly soap. They have options within the classroom and within the school environment. Sanitizing desks, chairs, tables, and lunch bins at the end of each day. Students can use coats, and for their coats and book bags, they can use cubbies, or they can use the back of their chairs. The main thing we're trying to avoid is really just that congestion. So, it's less about touching other people's things or people's things touching each other. And it's more about just really limiting that congestion and that congregating to the greatest extent possible. There will be limited shared materials, as we have been doing. And if they are sharing materials, or if they're unable to have their own, the materials will be sanitized if possible, or they would be put aside for 48 hours to sit and let the germs go away. The biggest thing I want to highlight on this slide is really the classroom connections piece. So we know that many students are more anxious than normal to come back full in. There's a lot of factors and a lot of variables that many of our kiddos are really worried about. So really, we just want to have the teachers focusing on those social emotional skills, building those connections, reestablishing a classroom community and environment that is positive and safe, and really just a great place for all the kids to be. So really finding ways for AM students to connect with PM, and just continuing to build upon that foundation, which they've already established with their individual classes. How parents can help, a couple things. You can definitely ask your child how they're feeling about returning to school for the full day. I know that we've had several parents reach out and let us know that their child is more anxious than they were anticipating, that they weren't thinking it would be that big of a deal for their child, since they've been going to school part-time all year. But many students are feeling that kind of first day jitters and sort of those anxieties that they may traditionally experience much more earlier in the year. So I'm really just talking through that with them and giving them some of those coping strategies that they may use if they're starting to feel anxious, or asking for a break, getting a drink, taking a deep breath, and being open and talking with them in that. The other thing you could do is make sure they're doing proper mask wearing. Like Kim was saying earlier, that is going to be really essential for our contact tracing and to make sure that everybody's safe. Any questions on the classroom protocols? Okay, we will move on to arrival and dismissal. Many of the staff members, and I'm assuming students too, are like, what time does school even start? It's been a year since we've had these times. We've gone back and forth between different start times, different stop times. So here they are. So kindergarten AM will be entering from 9 to 9:10, and then it's 11:40 dismissal for AM. And you can see grades 1 to 5 also can begin entering the building at 9 o'clock, and school starts at 9:10. AM kinder will dismiss at 11:40, PM kinder 3:40, as well as grades 1 to 5. So there will be a 3:40 dismissal, and you can also see the bell times. So, really 3:45 is the last bus group that will be dismissed. Our busers will enter and exit through the front doors. Car riders will continue to enter and exit through the side doors. Daycare riders, the same as they have been, as well as busers and car riders. And walkers are still going to use that back door, just to limit, congregation. One thing I want to point out on this is that all kindergarten students will be provided midday transportation. So if you're a kindergarten parent, you definitely want to make sure that you're aware of that option, that all kindergarten students can be provided midday transportation. You will want to check the district transportation website, which will be included in this link or in this PowerPoint after with the live link, and it's on the district website with just updated times, pick up, drop off if they've changed. How you can help, make sure your child knows how they're getting home, since it might be different, or since their schedule is changing. Just, that's a good reminder to talk to them about how they are getting home. Again, check for updated bus stop information. The times may be tweaked a little bit. And then remember, if you're a car rider, to put your sign somewhere visible in your car so that teachers on duty know whose car is whose.
We did have a question, what does K drivers, and K is short for kindergarten. So one thing that's different is all kindergarten, regardless of where you live and how close you are to the school, will get midday transportation. So kindergarten will ride to school. If you're AM kindergarten, they'll ride to school with everybody, K through 5 students. Then midday, just the kindergartners go home. So they're on a bus all by themselves, just with kindergartners and a kindergarten driver. And then midday, for if you're a PM kindergartner, they will be picked up by the kindergarten driver, kindergarten bus, and it's only kindergarten students midday. And then they will go to school and then go home with students K through 5. So that's a little bit different than usual, mostly because kindergarten will remain half a day because of our half-day kindergarten program. The other thing I will tell you is teachers will do, much like the first day of school, they'll ask all the kids how they're getting home. And most of the time it won't change, but it may, depending on your schedule now that we are full day, depending on your childcare needs. But all the teachers will ask the kids and document it and give it to the office so that we know, they know, and the teacher knows exactly how your child is going home. So if you could talk through that with them. A lot of the kids might be nervous. They might think that the procedures of arrival and dismissal may change because it's now a different schedule. But you can reassure them, as the teachers have, that the arrival and dismissal procedure really has remained pretty much the same. Getting into lunch procedures a little bit, you'll notice that in the classroom we were 3 feet away, and that's because we don't have enough space for the students in the classroom to be 6 feet away. However, in the lunchroom, they're going to be eating with their masks off. So to make sure that they are not close contact, the Franklin County Department of Health has said that if they're going to be masks off, they do need to be 6 feet away. And that is how we maintain that they won't be quarantined if they do have a close contact. So you can see our cafeteria set up a little bit. There will be more tables. Latchkey is currently using them. But there will be, at those long lunch tables, there will be 3 students at a lunch table. You'll also notice that there are individual desks, and I want to point that out a little bit too. One grade level will be eating at a time. But we did not have enough lunch tables for all of them. So those desks will have students at them. And you might think, oh my gosh, I don't want my child sitting at one of those desks. However, what we had to make sure we did was set those desks 6 feet apart. So even at the long tables, the optics might be, oh, they're sitting at a table with other people. They're still 6 feet away. So regardless of whether you're at a table or at a desk, you're 6 feet away from anybody else. So we have made sure that those desks are near other people at desks so that everybody has people that they can talk to as well. You'll also notice the A and B picture on the right, and I'm going to talk about that procedure a little bit too as we move forward with lunch procedures. So the first is ordering lunch and breakfast, and that procedure has been pretty consistent from the beginning of the year with the online link to order breakfast and lunch. And that will continue. You will continue to use that link for ordering your child breakfast or lunch. What I will tell you though is sometimes in that process, the kids don't know whether the families ordered lunch or they wanted a lunch, but the parents or families did not order them a lunch. There will be a secondary process where teachers will take a lunch count in the morning as well. And the purpose of that really is to give the cooks, which now have less time to prepare the lunches, they'll have a tentative number with the online ordering from families, but then an exact number that morning when the teachers submit their actual breakfast and lunch count. Also, I will continue to, I will tell you that lunches remain to be free and breakfast through the 2021 school year. And in fact, that will continue into September of the 2021 school year. So they remain to be free. So if your child has enjoyed getting a lunch, there is no lunch numbers to punch in, no cost at this point. Sanitize. Students will sanitize upon exiting the classroom and going into lunch. So as they exit the classroom, they will have their hands sanitized or washed as they enter the commons. Packers. So if your child would prefer to pack, they will keep their lunchbox with them. And they'll either keep it with them at their seat when they're in the classroom, or in their backpack, or in their cubby. And as they go down to lunch, they will take that with them and bring it right to their seat to eat. And then afterwards, they will put it in the lunch tub that is labeled for their class. So that will minimize touching between the lunch boxes, but they will be all together at the end of lunch. And the reason is so that way they don't get strewn about at recess or lost, because I know it's stressful for students to have lost lunch boxes. So we will put them in there, but the lunch tub will be sanitized at the end of the day. Lunch choices, that goes back to the picture I showed you a moment ago about choice A and choice B, and that is consistent with how it has been previously if you have ordered a lunch online. And the hot lunch, choice A, will rotate throughout each day, and it will be on the online ordering system, and the students will know it as they get into the classroom and communicated by the teacher. And B is usually the cold alternative, and sometimes that's hummus or sun butter and jelly. So they will choose A or B, and then they will grab the A or B choice if they have ordered it as they enter the cafeteria. So that's what that sign was. And on each side we'll have choice A or choice B, and they'll take that. It will be a self-contained bag that has all the utensils and condiments and milk right in the bag. So it'll be quick and easy for them to grab and go right to their seat to eat.
Pete, for a parent that hasn't ordered a lunch before, we have a question. Can you go in a little bit more detail about how they can order lunches online?
Yep. So if you read our newsletter each Friday, there is links in there, both from Glacier Ridge and then down at the bottom in the district updates, where you can order lunches. And it will say online lunch ordering, and it says RLA lunch or in-person lunch ordering. And that will allow you or the parents to choose which days you want to order lunch and which days you want to order breakfast for your child. I will tell you, if you don't do that, that's okay too, because that's the way our checks and balances system is. So if you are somebody that forgets to do that, as I know I do as a parent, the teachers will be asking the students at the beginning of the day if they have a lunch, if they've packed today, or if they need to get a lunch from the school that day as well. So nobody will go unfed if you don't send them with a packed lunch, and also did not order them online. So look for those links in the Glacier Ridge newsletter, which goes out each Friday. And then also, as I said, teachers will do it as well. You noticed that there were the seats at tables and desks. Teachers are assigning seats for the students at lunch, and that is for the primary purpose of contact tracing. However, the priority is students really enjoy lunch and they enjoy the socialization. So we need to know where the students are, but the teachers are the ones assigning those seats right now. And they're making sure that they put them with their peers and people that they have positive relationships with, so that they continue to enjoy lunch. One thing I'm wondering is how will the students feel about lunch? I'm not sure if they will get to lunch and think it is completely different because of the physical distancing and because of the assigned seat. So it is certainly different than traditional lunch has been, but I'm hopeful that it is a step forward in the right direction, where they can have a little more socialization and student connections amongst their peers. So, but we will have assigned seatings in the lunchroom for contact tracing, so we know exactly where they sat. And then just schedule wise, we'll have one grade level eating at a time. So the lunch is 20 minutes long, and they'll all eat as a grade level with all the class in that grade level in the commons. And then they will be dismissed for recess, which will be about 25 minutes. And then there will be 10 minutes of cleaning, which will allow for the sanitizing in between lunch periods at those tables. Feel free to ask questions in the chat if you would like to. Do we have the lunch times for the grade levels? Yes, I do. We can put that in the newsletter. Off the top of my head, it goes in order. And first grade is at 11 o'clock. Second grade is at 11:30. Third grade is at 12. Fourth grade's at 12:30, and fifth grade is at 1 o'clock. But I will add that to the newsletter as well. RLA lunches. So I know there are some RLA families on here as well. So RLA lunches will continue, and they will also continue to be free. And RLA families will continue to use the online ordering link. What I will tell you is the pickup time is currently 11:45 to 12:45, but that might change. The difficulty is now the cafeteria staff are extremely busy during that lunch time, which is right in the middle of our lunch sessions. So they're possibly going to district-wide shift that time to earlier before lunch, but that has yet to be determined officially. So we'll communicate that as well. How parents can help: send an easy to open lunch containers and packages. And here's what I will tell you. I know we have some first grade families on here. First graders have the most difficult struggle of transition eating lunch. They often have as much time as they need at home. And usually in our typical normal schedule, we have up to about 30 minutes for first graders to eat. And so they need that time to kind of adjust and really pace themselves with eating. They're also excited to socialize, so they talk and don't eat. So they go through a process of learning what 20 minutes feels like, or what lunch at school feels like. So encourage them not to rush in eating, because that's important, not to rush either, but continue to have that steady pace. As a family man, you often want to pack as much food as possible so that they are well fed, but sometimes the students feel like they have to eat it all, and then it takes a lot of time. So that will be adjusted, and of course we'll make sure that the students have enough time to eat, and we will not rush them, because eating is definitely a priority, but we do have a schedule that we need to adhere to too. But there is that 10-minute cleaning window in there. I'll also tell you that our assigned seats alternate. So if somebody does need to sit, nobody's going to be sitting in that, or somebody's not going to be sitting in that seat at the next lunch period. It will be at a slightly different location at that table. So it will be okay. Talk to your child about where to keep their mask. I'm sure there will be rogue random masks floating around everywhere, and we will have extra masks at a lot of different places. So that way we'll always have one available. Students really get upset when they lose their mask, but we'll have extras for them in terms of safety. But be thinking about what their mask management system would be. And again, focus on eating lunch, which kind of addresses easy to open containers. Water bottles. If you remember that the water fountains are still going to be closed, and as we turn the corner into spring, hopefully the water fountains are turned off. However, the water bottle filling stations are still on. And we were grateful, and the timing was perfect, because our PTO and fifth grade committee purchased a water bottle station for each water fountain station. So we have plenty of water bottle filling stations, but please remember to bring your water bottle, have your child bring it. And it's important to have them label it with their name so we can get it back to them. And then also talk to your child about what they order for lunch each day. We have those checks and balances, but oftentimes they want to change their mind, or they may not know what it is until the morning. So make sure that your child knows what they're doing each day. We don't want it to be a stressful experience, but having that conversation each day would be helpful. I see a question. Has the board superintendent given any indication that the mask mandates will go away? Example, if DeWine orders are lifted, will my kid be able to come to school the next day with no mask? That is a great question. And it's been difficult because of course we've been receiving guidance from Governor DeWine, as well as the CDC, as well as the Ohio Department of Health, and as well as the Franklin County Department of Health. I will say that that Dublin City Schools has consistently followed the guidance from Franklin County Department of Health. So even though DeWine makes an order, it's not until Franklin County Department of Health implements that that order or that recommendation. And there has been a big difference between orders or requirements versus recommendations. So he's made many recommendations that have not had to be implemented. So it's not until Franklin County Department of Health makes a recommendation or a guideline or a procedure that we implement it. So if the Franklin County Department of Health says that, then quite possibly, but I know that that would be a lot of discussion, because we know that masks are a great effective mitigation strategy. So we've even talked about what does that look like next year when there may not be a pandemic issue. Are we still encouraging, enforcing, requiring students or staff to wear masks? So that is a great question. I don't have the specific answer, but I know that if and when Franklin County Department of Health recommends that or mandates that, then it will be a discussion topic. Breakfast. We have breakfast is still provided as well, and breakfast will be ordered by families as well using the weekly online link. However, we will also ask the students in the morning as well. But keep in mind, breakfasts are provided the day before the actual breakfast meal should be eaten. And that's because we do not have the space or the manpower or the location for them to be eating at the school. So what we do is we provide the breakfast to the students before they go home. And that's been fairly consistent with what we've done thus far. We do have limited space to eat in classrooms now because we cannot distance them 6 feet away. So now students are 3 feet away. And so they have been traditionally able to eat possibly in the classroom, but now they will not be able to. I'll go through this slide and then I'll address the question in a moment. So at the end for kindergarten, kindergartners will also receive their breakfast delivered to their classrooms to take home. So if they order a breakfast or you order a breakfast for them, they will be delivered to classrooms to take home. The remaining students, 1st through 5th, will be located in the commons for a student to pick up at dismissal as they walk out the door to take home. And again, that would be for that following day's breakfast. Question, if one time we forget to order online for weekly for full return. Yep. So if you forget, it is completely okay, because as students come to school that morning, the teacher will ask all the students what they're doing for lunch and order them a lunch. So if the child did not pack and they did not order a lunch online, or the parent did not order a lunch online, the teacher will ask, do you have a lunch? No. And then they will order them a lunch and it will be provided for them at that particular lunch period. They'll also be able to give them the choice between A or B, so the hot lunch or the alternative cold lunch. Recess. Recess will also be very modified procedures. And again, I'm hopeful that the students will appreciate one step closer to normalcy, but it will be very different. Students will sanitize their hands before going out. There's hand sanitizers on their way out, or they're welcome to wash their hands with the restrooms that are nearby the cafeteria. Students will keep masks on during playing, and I know that that may be a concern, wearing a mask while they're outside, but that will be part of the mitigation strategies to make sure that that they are safe as much as possible, because we know that keeping them 6 feet apart while playing will be difficult. Classes will play in zones and rotate zones each day. So part of our contact tracing is trying to keep students in pods. And this is one thing I mentioned about assigned seating. We need to know exactly who the child was in close contact with. So we have assigned seating in the classroom, assigned seating in the lunchroom, and we'll have assigned seating in related arts. In addition, we'll have recess zones outside. We are not assigning who they play with, but we are keeping them with their class. So that way we know that they've at least had close contact with the people in their class. So it will be difficult to contact trace, but we'll know for sure that it's at least with their class and does not, they have not been in contact from class to class. Zones, you will see in a moment which the different zones are, but each zone will have their own tub of recess equipment, and then that will be disinfected and sanitized each day after they're done playing. These are the zones of recess, and you'll notice that the Gaga ball pits are in one zone. What we're trying to possibly do is separate those Gaga ball pits because they are very common. Each class will be in one of those zones. So we have 3 sections of each class at the most. And so each class will be in one of those zones and they will rotate each day. We will communicate with the students which zone they are in, and then teachers will help them as well. They'll also be marked off with cones. You'll notice that I had said Gaga ball, or you'll notice that zone 3 has the field. We are moving the soccer goals there so they can play soccer or possibly football. We have close contact sports in the district. There's basketball and there's wrestling. So we felt that at least with our mitigation strategies, we would be consistent with what's going on in the district. So limiting Gaga ball pit, even though they are sharing a ball or soccer, it is close contact, but they will be wearing masks and we will be sanitizing. So it was definitely a blend of health and safety, as well as social emotional support and the experience for students. Indoor recess, that will probably be the trickiest, and luckily we have cleared the long stretch of indoor recess in terms of cold weather. But indoor recess, you can see, is either with inclement weather or when it is colder than 25 degrees with wind chill. And in the classroom, we're going to continue to maintain 3 feet of physical distance. They still need to have their masks on. They should not bring toys from home and share those toys from home. And materials and games that are used, they'll either be sanitized or quarantined for 48 hours, just as a strategy, as we're doing consistently with our outdoor recess material. And then indoor recess duty and supervision will proceed with the staff as usual. How families can help at home: send 2 masks. And we anticipate students losing masks at recess or at lunch. So we'll have plenty of masks for them, but they are the paper masks. So if they're more comfortable with the cloth masks, or want or prefer their own, send them with an extra one. We certainly will allow them to go up to their classroom and get it if it's in their backpack and they lose it at lunch or recess. Discuss the importance of social and physical distancing while playing. That will be the hardest part for the students because they want to interact with their students, but continue to encourage them to distance when at all possible. Send a salt water bottle and label it. As I said, the drinking fountains are turned off, but the water bottle fillers remain open. And discuss proper mask wearing, especially while playing. I'm not sure if they have played contact sports with a mask on, but they will be outside at recess with them on. Our last section in this presentation is related arts, and students are excited about having in-person related arts as we as part of their instructional school day schedule. So some of the general mitigation strategies as for all related arts are that students will sanitize as they're going into related arts. And if you remember, they'll also sanitize when exiting the classroom as well. assigned seats so that we can contact trace. We did not, as I said about assigned seats, it will be different assigned seats in related arts as it has been in the other locations. One thing that we felt was important was that students have diverse social interactions with their peers in their class. And although we're limiting exposure to other classes, we didn't want them to be in the same pod in related arts as they were at lunch, as they were in their classroom. That would be really tricky for students to remain interacting with the same 4 or 5 students the entire day in each location. I often attribute it to siblings. They may get along and know each other really well, but they may be at each other's last wits, as siblings often are. And then limiting shared materials. Art will have shared materials, PE will have shared materials, and recess, as I mentioned, but we will be sanitizing and cleaning them frequently in between sessions. So there is time, 10 minutes in between each class where we will sanitize. And then physical education, art and music are the related art subjects. And then we've added library back in there as well. So it is the traditional 4 specials rotation. And those RLA families that are joining us, those will remain remote instruction, asynchronous. However, within that, library is now added to your rotation of asynchronous instruction. We did get a question just confirming all in means no more related arts using Google Classroom. They will attend the class only at school now. That is correct. So except for related or remote learning academy families. Remote Learning Academy families will continue to do their Google Classroom. However, the in-person students, so the students that were formerly hybrid, now full return, are now receiving their remote instruction, or receiving their related arts instruction in person.
Okay, I don't like this.
The last thing I want to say is the same way I started, is thank you. I appreciate everything that you've done. I appreciate your kindness and empathy throughout this entire year. I will speak for the staff because they just have shared how much they appreciate your support during this difficult time, because it's been very difficult having to flex and be innovative and change schedules so frequently. But I will tell you, they're very appreciative and thankful of you as well, because as we've transitioned from hybrid and 8 o'clock start to 8:30 start to now full return, it has been difficult on families to have to adjust their schedule frequently. So they're very much appreciative of your flexibility as well. I will open it up to questions. We've been answering questions throughout. And again, if you think of anything, you're welcome to type it in the chat. We will also, you have my email earlier in the chat if you want to email me, or you're welcome to call the school or talk with the teacher, or reach out to Kellie Axelband, our admin intern, as well. So we'll pause a moment as any questions come in. But I thank you, Kellie. Anything that you would like to say as we go, or anything you want to add? She's shaking her head no. So I think that's indicating that I have talked plenty. So again, I thank you. Have a wonderful night. We'll put this information, send it out in an email, and I look forward to a little bit of getting back to normal. I did receive one comment that is a great reminder about Chromebooks. We do need Chromebooks back. As you may have seen in our newsletter, we do need Chromebooks back from those families that are full return. If you're a Remote Learning Academy family, you can keep the Chromebook if you have one from the school or district. But we do need the Chromebooks back from the families that are full return. And that is because right now we've only had half the class in the classroom. So we've been able to outfit the entire class at the same time, and then we clean them in between. However, now we'll have all the students at the same time. So we will need those Chromebooks back. And really there will not be any asynchronous work at home for the full in students anyway. So they should not need them traditionally for instruction from the school. So yes, please please return those by Friday if you can. And as the fingers crossed, we stay all in. However, in the event that we switch back to hybrid, how much notice will be given on the board's decision? I will tell you, it has been very difficult to plan switching from one to the other. And we've communicated with district leaders as well as the board that we'll need some time to transition. So they do know that that families and schools need time to transition. Sometimes it's a matter of how quickly we need to either close a school or adjust based on manpower. And that's probably the biggest concern, or why we would have to switch quickly because of manpower. You may have read in the news, Olentangy had to close some schools because of reactions to the second round of vaccinations. And that's because of a manpower issue, sub shortage, which we all share similar subs and staff. So, and same reason why we switched from 8:30 start to 8 o'clock start, because it was a staff shortage for bus drivers and they had to do multiple routes for elementary. So I can't answer exactly, but I'm hopeful that it would be at least a week or two and hopefully more. But I'm also optimistic that we would not have to switch back to hybrid. I really hope that this is one step closer to getting back through this pandemic in a positive light. So good question. Again, thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening. Have a wonderful dinner. Enjoy the weather. And don't forget daylight savings this week. So daylight savings, new adjusted schedule, and full return all on Monday. So much like the Kurty kids, good luck with that. So thank you. Have a wonderful evening.